Welcome to Project Comedy, a podcast by and for military veterans doing stand-up comedy, turning military banter into quality stand-up comedy acts. We might be veterans, but our comedy aims to get everybody laughing. We're more than aware of our limitations, and I'm not just talking sexually. We're open mic comedians of varying experience, and we have an amazing time doing so. But by getting out on the circuit, we get the delight to occasionally work with professional comedians. And it's amazing to see a professional do his stuff. But what do the professionals think of us open micers? What common mistakes do they see us make? Do they have any tips for success? And is this really a place for a bunch of insane veterans on the circuit? To discuss that, I'm joined by Gabriel Murphy, professional Guinness taste tester, Jamie Johnson, professional Dungeons and Dragons dice assessor, our newbie, Sean Morris, professional virgin. Sorry, that was supposed to read comedy virgin. And I'm Jay Saunders, professional dog warrior. How you doing, boys?
Well, I mean...
And to ensure we have a professional viewpoint, we're delighted to be joined by a professional stand-up comedian, Nik Coppin, a man so funny, he even let Gabe give him a hug before he performed at a kid's show. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Good. Glad to be here, mate. Thanks for inviting me.
You're more than welcome, because, of course, the first time we actually met in person was when we ended up doing the Brighton Fringe Festival last spring, which was a delight to meet you there. But for those of you that have not met you before, come on, give us a background on your career, how you started out and how you ended up going to becoming a professional stand-up comic.
Well, you see, well, actually, before I go starting this, and, you know, when you say a man's so funny, he even let Gabe hug him, that wasn't because I'm funny. That was because I was afraid.
Were you afraid of performing?
Well, no, I was afraid. I was not. Look, listen, when someone comes up to you, right, looking like Zangief from Street Fighter 2 to give you a hug, you don't say no. Right? You just go, all right, I'll just accept the hug and hope I've still got some, well, ribs that aren't broken afterwards. So, yeah, that's nothing to do with being funny, just brave. But to get back to your question, so, well, here's the thing. When people ask about, you know, my journey into comedy, how I get into comedy, what, I think there's kind of like at least a couple of ways to answer that. It's like, well, I could tell you my thoughts on it. I could tell you the process, or it's like, you know, the whole kind of like the psychology behind it's a little bit different, isn't it? But I suppose I could start by telling you why I decided to do it. Is that a good place to start?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I as a kid growing up, I was always a fan of comic books. Marvel superheroes being my main, like Spider-Man, Hulk, and all that business. The Thing, Fantastic Four, Avengers, but there's not so much into Batman and Superman. But I used to draw as well, and I do drawings a lot of the time. I still currently do caricatures for some people. It's a little bit of a sideline, but more if people want them. But yeah, so yeah, I do. I thought you might have known that. I'll show you some caricatures at some point of people that I've done. Sometimes I do it for fun. Sometimes people, you know, that I do it for commissions or, you know, for a birthday present for someone. But so I used to like just draw, you know, superheroes and stuff for fun. So I always wanted to be a comic book artist. That was what I always wanted to do. And then I start when you do art in secondary school, and you know it's proper art, and you've got to, you know, do perspective, and then you learn, you know, get taken to all these boring art galleries and, you know, see these paintings. I remember one in, I don't know, somewhere on some school trip, and it was an entirely black painting, and it was called Blue, you know, that sort of crap. And you go, this is boring. Get into all this boring art stuff, and, you know, it's not as much fun as just drawing Spider-Man fighting the Hulk. And so I got a bit bored and disillusioned with the art. Like, I didn't want to go to art college. This was about 14, 15 years old. And then at that point, this is where it gets a bit embarrassing, I suppose. Now, I was really a big fan. I started watching Neighbours when I was about 15.
Right.
Here we go. And I was a big fan of Kylie Minogue. Oh, I loved Kylie Minogue. And you know, when you're teens or when you're growing up, you have these crushes on actresses and stuff. And And then, you know, you're never going to meet them. And I don't know, at that age, and I thought, you know what, you're never going to meet someone like Kylie Minogue unless you're an actor. So I wanted to be an actor. Like, you know, that's what I decided I wanted to do. But then again, drama school, again, more boring crap, isn't it, really? And, you know, like, you know, I wrote off to a couple of drama schools, and then you talk to people, it's like, oh, you know, if you were a chocolate in a box, which one would you be? And be a tree and all that rubbish. So I thought, I don't want to do that. That's boring. But still kind of wanted to be an actor. And also Eddie Murphy I saw a couple of Eddie Murphy movies. He was quite big at the time. And I found out that, you know, he got into acting like a lot of people when you look into it here and especially America through stand-up comedy. So for that could be something to be interested in. So I just looked into stand-up comedy, and this was like, you know, late teens. Again, I just didn't really know. I looked into it, but it was not something that I really felt I could do at that time. I didn't have any experience of it. I looked in at Time Out at the comedy listings, made a couple of little phone calls, but it was years later until I was like nearly 30 when I was, you know, started to go back to the idea of being a comedian. And then I met a couple of people, because people would always say, oh, be a comedian, yeah, whatever. You know what people are like, you know, destroy your confidence before you've got any. And then I was just out with some workmates, and I was talking to people at work. I used to work on London Underground. I was in the ticket office at the time at Baker Street Station after being booted out of being a signalman. I was a signalman on
that points out how long ago it was. There was actually a fucking ticket office. So we're going back to when God was a boy.
There you go, mate. There were proper signal cabins, and they booted me out of that. I could bore you senseless with all the technicals as to how I got booted out of the signal cabin. But I will tell you this, that when it was my time was up as a signalman, I got invited to the signal manager's office, John Staples, his name, and he sat me down. I'm thinking, because my dad and my brother were on London Underground at the time, so I thought, bringing shame on the family, going to be sacked or whatever. So I felt a little bit bad going down to see John Staples for my disciplinary hearing after all my signalman cock-ups. And he said to me, all right, Nick, he said, I just want you to know that this is the worst signalman's record I've seen in 30 years of being a manager. And he said, you've got more cock-ups on your record than all of the other signalmen put together. And there was about 50 signalmen. There was about 50 signalmen. So at that point, I was quite proud of myself. I've achieved something here. And then, so I was in the ticket office for a few years. And then, just, you know, chatting and hanging out with work colleagues. And, you know, then they start talking about, oh, you're quite funny. Have you ever thought of writing comedy, you know, and nights out and stuff? And I was like, funny enough, I have. And then that kind of gave me a bit of confidence to do it. And then I was going to do some comedy competitions and some gigs with some work colleagues that were interested, but they never did it. And I just continued doing it. So I think my first ever gig was at the Orchard Theatre in Dartford. It was like this competition held in conjunction with, it was between Hooch, the Alco Pop at the time, and the Comedy Store. They sponsored it. And it was more of an audition, really, as to whether to put you through to this thing. And they had these like ident adverts on the TV. I didn't get through, but it was the first gig I ever did. Weirdly, I had this material I was going to do about being on the tube as a signalman and cocking it up. But at the last minute, I changed and did this weird sort of material about knighthoods and how, you know, there used to be all these big, powerful knights, and now there are, you know, people like, you know, Elton John and actors and all like that. You know, they used to fight dragons. Now they just sing songs. But anyway, it's just that. It was a bit loose and it was well observed. But at the last
in fairness, I would not follow Elton John into battle.
Well, there you go.
I was going to say, it's a lovely topic to go about, because you think about where heraldry came from. It was who's going to fight most effectively for you, and you see who's just come out the latest list of honours. You go, nah, I've spent 23 years in the military. None of those fuckers are serving with me. They would be a bullet magnet. I'm not serving with any of them.
Because I was in the army, I'd be like that. Well, who's going to pay me the most?
Well, there you go. That makes sense, you see, and I can get behind that. But yeah, so it was anyway. So last night I changed it, and it didn't get through. And then I'd got this gig. The first ever gig I did, proper gig in front of people, was Belly Laughs in South Croydon, run by this American woman called Elizabeth Charbonneau. She was like this tall, skinny American lady, very talk a bit like that. She was quite good. Anyway, I did this gig. that I got booked in by a friend. And then I was going to do the knighthood material, but then when she was comparing, there was a guy in the audience from who worked. He was on a birthday do. He was a signalman for British Rail. So I thought, I'll do this. I'll do the signalman material. And then I went on. And I started talking about the being, you're a signalman, yeah, and then I went, because I just started on something I wasn't really into the banter as much as I am now. And I said, I used to be a signalman on London Underground, and then I couldn't think of any of the funny stories about that particularly. Then I just went, yeah, but then I cocked it up, and now I'm in the ticket office, and everyone laughed. It wasn't even, I didn't. It gave me great confidence, but I didn't even know or why I got the laugh. And a friend explained to me it's because obviously signalman's seen as an important job, and now you're in the ticket office. But it just gave me the confidence. Anyway, I did the material about working on the tube. That was my second gig, and then the third gig was at a place called, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a place called the Blue Nun, I think, in London Bridge. And I had like a 5-minute spot, and the woman that booked it was Ava Alexis, her name is now. She's changed her surname. I was meant to do about a 5-minute spot, and I did that 25 minutes, man. I got told off, man.
Holy crap.
So bad.
Did they have a paid headliner as well?
No, it was just all open micers, man.
But it was one of those,
and I've seen now when I see like new acts like overrunning, because again, you just you get excited. Sometimes you lose track of time. And then I came off stage. I didn't know I did that long. I was just bantering, having a great laugh in this little open mic gig. And then because she was lovely, Ava, but then she just came up to me and goes, just so you did great there, but you did like 25 minutes. And she told me off, but in a nice way. I think she was kind of proud that I managed to do 25 minutes, but at the same time, it was like naughty. So that was my first 3 gigs. And then from there, it was just a case. I didn't do that many gigs in my first 2 or 3 years. I did those 3 in quick succession. Then I did it's like 6-7 months sometimes between gigs. And I thought, if I'm going to take this seriously, I've got a gig every night, as much as I can. So I think 2001, I started kind of gigging as much as I can. And then, the rest is history, as it were. So that was my sort of way into it, my thought process and my first 3 gigs. I mean, the psychology of why we do it, who knows? Who knows?
It's strange you said that, because when you said you ended up doing 25 minutes, on one of those first ones, when my circuit down here in Portsmouth, which has recently died, it was very easy for me to get to the 10-minute circuit, because it was predominantly all open micers. Very few paid acts were down there. There's only 2 venues in the area that actually have paid acts.
Yeah.
So as soon as I started doing 10s, I fell in love with it. But then going back to do a 5, oh my God, I find it so difficult to do a 5 now. A 10 is a breeze.
Yeah.
But trying to do a 5 is an absolute nightmare, because especially if it's something like a gong show or a competition, and you get penalized if you're going over and what have you. Trying to make that tight 5 that gets you noticed, that's such a pigging challenge. When did you know that you were actually being spotted on the circuit? When did you realize people out there are actually starting to take me seriously?
It's hard to pinpoint any specific time, but I think it was when I was going out every like at least 3 or 4 times a week, but also I was doing shift work still at the time, so it was weird, because I used to work central London in the ticket office. And I'd see like acts on the new act circuit, and other comedians, because they'd go through the stations, and sometimes they'd buy a ticket like at Baker Street, King's Cross, Embankment, and I was like so frustrated. I was like late shift, and that's why in the end I had to go part time. I went part time, and then I could do that was in the morning, so I could do gigs all in the evening. But then getting to gigs up in say Newcastle and back for an early shift was hard, so I had to work my way out of that. So. I would try and get out as much as I could, and to know when you get noticed. I think that obviously the first time you're going to notice you've been noticed is when people start to pay you, which is why being quite chatty as an act, and I don't mind a bit of banter with the audience. You can MC. And MCing is a good way to start getting paid, because you're there all night, and they need MCs, and you're not flitting off elsewhere. And they, want a reliable MC that can chat to the crowd. So I think Mirth Control, actually, they're still around now, but they used to have like loads of gigs all over the country, and they're always looking for people to drive to gigs. I mean, it became a bit of a running joke. It's like Mirth Control, and like they've got a list of gigs, and we need a London driver and all that, and there's going to be some poor sod having to drive 3 hours there and 3 hours back for do a 10-minute spot for no money. But you do that, and people do sort of, I mean, Mirth Control has had its knockers over the years, misses. But, for exploiting acts and reducing budgets, that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying they didn't do any of that, but I know Jeff Whiting and I know Mirth Control, and I have to say that back then they were very instrumental in giving a lot of new acts great opportunities to go and gig up and down the country and to get their first paid gigs. And I think Mirth Control may have been certainly my first regular paid gigs, because they know you can drive to gigs, you can MC gigs, and you can start to be able to open with 15-20 minutes. And that's when you start to realize that, actually there's a chance for me here to get to become a professional, and you start getting paid by Mirth Control and other little gigs.
Well, this enables do a call back to the previous episode, because that episode we were talking about crowd work, which for Gabe is a natural thing. For myself, Sean, and for Jamie, it's something that terrifies the crap out of me. Was that something you naturally fell into? That was something you were comfortable doing? Or was it a conscious thing to go into the crowd work that enabled you to get the skill set to be an MC?
It was just, I'm quite a chatty person. And obviously I worked on the stations on London Underground, and you've got to chat to people. That's a pub, serving the public job. So yeah, I'm just naturally quite chatty anyway. And I mean, even when I do sets, I mean, nowadays I tend to kind of go, right, if I'm doing a set, you just kind of like more bang it out, don't you? But I still chat to people. I'm naturally chatty. It's not like I kind of like, right, I've got to work out how to chat to people. It was kind of like more naturally what I did anyway. And that's why with Mirth Control, I started getting a lot of paid like MC work. And even when I started doing jonglers, I did a few like 10-minute spots for jonglers, little tryout spots. And then they booked me to MC. And I was mostly MCing at jonglers, because obviously jonglers, you've got 200 or 300 people, like, on birthdays and stag do's. You need someone that's going to chat to them and, tell them what's going on and have a word to them if they're getting a bit boisterous. And so I got put into MC a lot more so because I am quite a chatty person. You
just give me a massive aside there, because those that have been watching comedy and taking comedy seriously for a while will know what eventually happened to jonglers. So it ended up with the financial problems and acts not getting paid and what have you. But do you think the circuit's changed since jonglers has gone? Because of course there was this big chain all up and down the UK where you had a potential to get out there and perform, whereas from my perspective, where I'm sitting at the moment, I find it very hard to find new gigs. There aren't sort of those chain clubs that you can go, I want to get known by you because I know this will enable me to reach out to other venues in other cities. Has it changed since jonglers disappeared?
Oh, well, I would say definitely. I mean, there have been people like Just a Tonic took over some of the jonglers spaces. And obviously if jonglers aren't around, there's always audiences that are looking for other comedy clubs. But yeah, I'd say it changed massively, because when you think about it, jonglers at the height of their powers, they had 17 clubs all over the country. When I started doing it, there was 15 clubs. So I was doing jonglers regularly 2 or 3 times a month, and they pay quite good money, and they put you in a hotel, and they get free food and booze on the night. Stags and hens wanting to have their photo taken with you. It was a great laugh. And it was like a good weekend away, and the Christmas weeks was like a whole week of like a bit of extra money as well. But when you think about it, I mean, you've got to be pretty bulletproof to do jonglers. I mean, you get people that are a bit more chatty, a little bit more character-based maybe, but you've got to be pretty bulletproof to do jonglers. And so you're looking at every act that does jonglers is pretty much a headline act at smaller gigs or other gigs or a good compare or support act. So if you've got now 15 clubs, they sort of like a few clubs went and a few more, and then it sort of died, and they've sort of started up under a kind of rebranded slight thing with Kev Orkian, and they're doing something slightly different now. But if you think about the fact that you had 4 strong acts every week, every jonglers gig, 15 clubs around the country, now that's gone. Where are those acts going to go? I suppose they have to go and look at other gigs. So anyone that was headlining, say, a certain smaller gig or emceeing a smaller gig, they'd now not be doing that because the acts that are doing jonglers were doing it. I mean, I was quite lucky in that when it started to go, and I could tell you some stories about my interactions with them about the money, and I certainly didn't take any crap from them after a little while, anyway. And I can tell you where I think what really did it, they owed me about 2.5 grand at one point, and then
Ouch.
I know, and I did jonglers in Nottingham, and that was a really tough one. But I was booked for Bristol originally. Bristol's a nice one, right? So I did
Right.
this, and then I got the email saying, "Oh, are you okay for jonglers?" I said, "Yeah, Bristol, right?" They went, "Oh no, Nottingham." And I was like, "Good thing I asked, isn't it? Really?" So I did
Bloody
this
hell, yeah.
horrible, yeah, and it used to be really tough anyway. But then they had it in this Oceana, big nightclub, and it was a horrible gig, right? So Friday night, it was like drunk, heckling, and it was manageable, but it was quite horrible, right? So I did this tweet, and at jonglers type thing, and it was just something. All I said was, shame I wasn't at Bristol because it's a lot nicer than Nottingham. And Nottingham was quite, tough or whatever, right? They get a phone call from the woman who owned the jonglers brand at that time when she got the name back. Oh, the people at Jonglers, they think you're having a go at the managers and the show wasn't run properly, blah blah blah. And I was like, no, I'm not having a go at them. I'm just saying I prefer to have done Bristol because it's a nicer gig, right? But
Yeah.
the thing with me that what really resonated with me is everyone's chasing Jonglers for money, right? And they're being ignored a lot of the time. Then I get
Yeah.
a phone call from Jonglers, right, having a go at me about a tweet, and I'm like, you cheeky bastards.
Yeah.
It's like, how dare you ring me about a tweet? How about you ring me about my 2.5 grand? How about that?
Exactly. Exactly.
At that point, it was like I had one more in Portsmouth, actually. I had one more in Portsmouth, did that. And I had a bit of a go at them about the money. And then they started to pay me. It's a weird story that will bore you senseless. But yeah, in the end, I thought I'm not doing that anymore. But what I was getting at was that, so I could really get a bit more because people were a bit worried. Oh, I won't get any jonglers gigs, and well, what gigs that aren't paying you? It's better off doing a gig for 50 or 100 quid cash that you're actually getting the money than 250 that you're not. But I'd already started doing things like Edinburgh Fringe and Australia comedy festivals. So when jonglers failed, I didn't
Yeah.
really have to give too much of a toss about chasing it up. It was a big dent in my earnings, of course it was. But then so was going part time in London Underground, leaving London Underground. This is just another little, I don't know, I suppose, I say backward step. I didn't take the step as such. It was kind of forced upon me, but it was like, okay, so now I've lost, I don't know, 750 or grand a month from doing jonglers, but I've got Edinburgh Fringe to do. I've got Brighton Fringe to do. Whereas a lot of people that did jonglers at the time, that was their career almost. They'd sort of got to
Yeah.
jonglers
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
they didn't really they had to really worry about it. Whereas luckily I didn't have to worry about that. So all good.
And then you decided to put another string to your bow because our great mate that enabled Project Comedy to happen, Jay Sodegar. I mean, he's taught all of us, to get to where we are at the moment. But you too, you also teach stand-up comedy as well, don't you? What do you get out of teaching stand-up comedy?
Well, it's fun actually. I mean, I would say obviously a few extra quid here and there, but it's mostly the fun and it's something I can do during the day, isn't it? So it doesn't really impact on the gigs. But I mean, I first did a workshop. It was in Darwin, weirdly enough, because a friend of a friend who was actually in Darwin at the time I just started doing comedy. She was like, they were talking about like doing workshops and getting funding from the Northern Territory Arts, whatever, right? And so this person got in touch with me and said, "Do you want to do some workshops with us? 3 days of workshops, and we'll pay you to come to Darwin, or pay you this whatever." And I was like, "Yeah, why not? Give it a go." And actually, I went to one of the Laughing Horse things, only one of the days, and spoke to Lewis Bryan, who was doing it at the time. Just to, I mean, I know comedy, I know how doing it, but passing that information on, it's a bit different, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
had a
Yeah.
little look at what they do. And then so I did these 3 days of, some of the stuff that you did on the course with Jay, but lots of different stuff, stories and all that. That was the first time I did a workshop, but that was just a one-off thing because I was in Australia and I got flown to Darwin to do it. And then because I just thought, well, workshops and teaching people aren't necessarily, it's not my thing. Because I always thought if people want to get into comedy, they'll find their way into it somehow. And so, but then I was at the Edinburgh Fringe, and Jay and Jojo Sutherland, who normally do the Laughing Horse courses, couldn't do them. So Alex Petty at Laughing Horse said, "Oh, well, will you do 3 courses the last week of Edinburgh?" Which initially I thought, well, I've done kind of workshops before, and I kind of know how they're done. But also, I was that year I was doing like 6 or 7 shows every day of the Fringe, like kids
Bloody
shows,
hell.
and then often I know, right? And it's like up at 10 in the morning, 10:30, off to do a kid show, then another show, then another show, and then come midnight, that's sort of finally finished. Have a couple of drinks, go to bed. But then I said to Alex, so in my head, I'm like, oh, well, I'm not sure. And Alex was like, oh, well, this is what you'll get for it. And blah. I was like, all right, okay, I'll do it.
It's nice to know that you're a whore.
It's like, not really want to do it. I'm knackered, but get money, all right.
Excuse me while I spread my legs.
Exactly. There you go, mate. There you go. Then we're getting into the consent. We're getting into your thing now, aren't we? But anyway, so
see, girls get OnlyFans and we get comedy courses.
Basically, yeah, that's it. Yeah. They're even taking over football now. So anyway, they've still got OnlyFans. Anyway, but what it wasn't necessarily. It was obviously it was about helping Alex out as well. And Jay couldn't do it, Jojo couldn't do it. So I said okay, but the thing with it was because the courses were like 10 until 2, so I had to get someone else to cover me at one of the kid shows that I was doing. Luckily, Dave Chawner works with me on that, but I get someone else to cover me. But then I had to be up at like 8:30 in the morning. Now we're 2.5, 3 weeks into the Fringe. 6, 7 shows a day of peeling myself out of bed, exactly at like 10, half 10. And now I've got to get up at like 8:30. And that year, I had a really, really bad ankle and I was hobbling everywhere because I've done my ankle in and I didn't have any time to heal because I'm walking everywhere. So I'm hobbling to the courses at 8:30 in the morning, knackered, man. And but then I did these 3 courses and even I didn't quite really get, Laughing Horse teaches their course a certain way. I would do my workshops a certain way. So I did what I did, and I spoke to Jay about it. And I thought actually it was quite fun, even though I was knackered. It was a lot of fun. And then just to kind of like see how Jay and other people do it, I sat in with a couple of courses with him back in London, and we had a good laugh. Me and Jay, we had a really good time in the breaks. We go for our coffees, and it's a 2-day course. I think he'd done the 2-day thing with you, I'm sure. Yeah. And sometimes on the second day, you don't always get people come back. So me and Jay used to kind of have bets on who wouldn't come back the next day. And it was like, whoever, we guess, and then we kind of like, whoever loses buys the coffees. And I always got it right. I was like, that person ain't coming back, man. And Jay owed me 3 or 4 coffees at one point. But yeah, and it was good. And, as you know, Jay's sort of good at passing that information on as a little teacher. I just enjoyed it. And then I obviously started doing more for Laughing Horse. And then I started doing my own ones in various places. And obviously I spoke to Jay because Jay and Laughing Horse do their course a certain way. But they still use techniques that everyone would use. So I said to Jay, well, what are you okay with me using and not using? So there's certain things about the connection talks that he does. I do that differently. I do certain things differently. I mean, the bases aren't too different, but obviously Jay's got the things that he's written specifically. So I stay away from them. And I've worked into, I can do the course, a 1-day intensive course. I can do 2 days. I can do it over a period of time. So I've just tried to kind of adjust it and make it fun in my own way, really. And obviously I travel the world doing comedy shows. So I throw a load of stories in about things that have happened all over the world and stuff. So, yeah.
That's one of the things we've got so lucky with because bless Jay, because when we set up Project Comedy, he turned around to us and said, right, here's a series of things that I will let you guys go away and train other veterans to get them into stand-up. So they've got the basics. It's basically an ad to get them to go off and do the full course. That's exactly what we've done with Sean, is we've taken him through some of the basics to get into that. What we've noticed out of it for the likes of myself, Gabe, and Jamie.
No, they haven't.
Well, one day we'll get you on the stage, Sean. One day we will actually get you on the stage, and you'll actually lose your virginity.
Fuck you.
But one thing it's made us do is we now look at comedians in a completely different way. Because once you've actually shared these skills, you look at comedians in a different way, which is, that's my attempt at a professional segue to ask my next question of you, Nick. When you now see open mic comedians, are there standard mistakes that they make as open micers? Or are there traps they fall into that you go, actually, if you lost some of that, you'd be a far more effective act?
Well, yeah, I mean, I used to see that even before I did the courses, but I definitely see it a lot more now. And one of the things, obviously, I mean, we teach about connection with the audience, and then we teach I mean, as you know, essentially, it's like ways to connect material, and then editing that material. There's obviously bits and pieces of how to connect with crowds. I tell a few more stories and do other different things. That's essentially it. But you see all the time, and you open mics and you go, some of them you go, you either haven't done a course at all, or you've listened to the wrong things or done the wrong course. We'll say no names.
Right. Yeah. We all know of them.
Good, excellent. For example, I mean, there are a lot of acts that you see around this area that are a little bit, shall we say, formulaic. And at least you can go, well, you've listened to what you've been told, but you've almost forgotten to be yourself. Like, but that's, at least they've listened to what they've been taught about the basics of how to do comedy. But then you do look at other people and you go, no one's ever told you how to edit your material, even in your head, and then, like when you kind of like, also, it's not just, as what you say, it's how you say it, it's performing the material.
Are you saying that the material they're bringing, it's too much setup, not punchline, or is it they're not getting to the point of delivery?
Yeah, there's too much exposition. There's too much setup, and also, like, as you know, and if you're gonna do a long setup, your punchline's got to be bloody good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's
like, So, first of all, where is the punchline? And second of all, that was a long setup to get there. And also what I've noticed is they've got the words right. Some of them, they've got the structure right, but they've not added there's no attitude to it. There's no performance. It's like you've written some quite good jokes there, but you're not performing it. And sometimes I want to pull them to a side and go, pull them to the side and go, look, this is what you need to do. I mean, I don't. Sometimes people ask you for advice, and I'm happy to give it, but I've certainly learnt my lesson with regards to offering up advice when it might not be needed. But you just see people making these basic mistakes or not, and they're never going to improve unless someone has a word to them or they have a word to themselves. But yeah,
I think that's a real challenge to a lot of veterans. Gabe, chip in on this one, because we all knew people in our
because I've said so much.
Shut up, Gabe. You talk too much.
But there was always a couple of people in your unit that were really, really funny. But then when you look back at it, I look back at it now. But it was normally shaggy dog stories. They were really, 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 really long stories for a very small punchline at the end. But it was, often shocking or inappropriate or not politically correct. But we thought they were the funniest person in our unit. But actually taking that to the stage is a completely different thing. It's one thing to sit around in a barrack and make your mates laugh. It's very different to actually step to the stage. But just by learning a couple of tricks, you can use your military humor to actually become an effective stand-up. Have you seen that with some of your students? They naturally thought they were funny because they've been telling these long-winded shaggy dog stories, and suddenly they realize actually it's a different technique to actually be an effective stand-up.
I've not actually had any students.
No. For once, Gabe, I wasn't actually referring to you as our most senior instructor in the place. I was talking to a professional.
I was just feeling a bit like Mark Hamill in like fucking episode 8 or whatever. And bearing in mind you referred to me by fucking name.
I said chip in.
And then ask Nick a question, you dickhead.
I'm going to go with Gabe here. It's like, I just thought he's talking to Gabe, isn't he? Because he said, Gabe, chip in. Then he started saying, then asked a question. And I was like, is that to Gabe or is that to me? I don't know.
I never pretended I was professional. I never pretended I'm professional.
Typically locked up in a basement, mate, until Stockholm syndrome kicks in. And then I kind of release them into the wild. But I mean, Nick might have a different view on things.
well, with regards to the natural, and it is, you do get some people that, I mean, I've had a couple of Jack the Lads in, and they get a bit, you've got to sort of bring them back down to earth because they realise they're not as funny as they thought. But you have it in gigs as well. Someone's being really funny. I don't do it anymore for many good reasons, but I have got people up on stage, in the past. and they're thinking they're Mr. Funny. You get them up, and the best they can do on stage is like some old racist or sexist joke. Because first of all, there's a difference between being funny. There is a difference between being funny down the pub with your mates and taking that and presenting it on stage as material, but also which goes into the thing which we all say is the most important thing in live comedy and probably even life is connection, isn't it? Because if you're down the pub with your mates, you've got an instant connection with them, and they're all having a bit of a laugh. On stage, there's no connection, is there? It's like you've got to win them over, and you've got to win them over with some well-structured and presentable and confident comedy. So it's totally different.
Are there any particular signs when you're looking at an open micer that makes you go, this guy's got something? When do you look at an open micer and go, they're going to go places, or they got something that can be built upon?
With the open mics, I mean, sometimes you can see they've got a natural presence and they're really comfortable on stage. And they've got good jokes. I mean, no one's good when no one's great when they first start. But one thing I always say about newer comedians is if they haven't got the ability to go away and improve, like some of them are, I've seen basically comedians over the years that have been crap when they first started. And you see them 10 years later and they've got really good. And then you've got other acts that have been really good and they've given up. Because you've really got to put the time in to sort of like analysing what it is you're doing and what you're not doing, putting the effort in, obviously, because, once you get out on that circuit, after getting that initial confidence and the tools with which to work, it can be, it's really hard out there to do that. But yeah, so I think the ones that are never going to really make it are the ones that haven't got the ability to kind of go, how do I need to improve? They don't listen.
Right.
They don't, check themselves, and they just carry on making the same mistakes.
That self-reflection on what they've just done.
Yeah.
Go on. Before we go to the break, then, here's a loaded question for you, because you came and saw us do Gags Army when we did the Brighton Fringe Festival, and we knew of you, but you had never encountered us. When you came and saw Gags Army, what did you actually think of that show?
I was actually the first thing I noticed, and I was really impressed with, was how different the three of you were. Because especially if you've got three newer acts who've all done a course together, it would be so easy for them to be quite similar. And I've seen people do this, like at fringe shows. There's like two-handers, three-handers, and they're all like these. They're very similar styles. They look very similar, whereas you guys all look different. You're looking a bit like Joe Wilkinson now with your beard.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll take that as a compliment.
Zangief is still Zangief. and obviously Jamie was like in his suit doing puns, but like you were sort of like a lot more sort of like storytelling, observation. Obviously Gabe Zangief was, he's like, he's sort of quite a bit more quite chatty, more sort of chatty than Jamie, but it's sort of some dark, edgy stuff. And then Jamie was like in the suit with the gags, and the one-liners. But it was, so it was I immediately struck and impressed by how different the styles were. And obviously you look at and go, obviously there's newer acts, you've got to improve. The good thing about it was, because I'd met you I think was that afternoon, and I came and saw you the next night, didn't I, as well? Because obviously they cut you short. Jay did his 2-minute headline spot.
That was brilliant fun.
That was funny.
That's because of my improv 15-minute crowd set.
Well, there is that, but also the fact that the security and bar staff cut.
Oh fucked it up.
So, 2 minutes, off you go, Jay. See you later, mate. But yeah, but because I'd sort of chatted to you earlier, again, we had that connection. So immediately I know you, I want you to do well, obviously. But even aside from that, it was just that kind of, just the differences in your styles. And all your styles were polished in their own ways, and all seemed quite confident. Jamie seemed to lack a little bit more confidence, because it was like lack of confidence, because it was quite gags, and it was you two kind of were a bit more energetic and lively, and obviously Zangief and his edgy material. I immediately thought it was great that you all had different styles. That was what immediately struck me about it.
Brilliant. Well, in that case, it's a perfect time for us to give a quick link out then to tell people how they could join Project Comedy.
would you like to join Project Comedy? The reality is, it couldn't be much simpler. All you have to do is get on the internet and find your way over to the Project Recce website. That's Project, the word Project Recce, as in RECCE.org. O-R-G. Have a look in the upper right hand corner, click on the menu and click on Project Comedy. Scroll down there a bit and you'll find a link that says apply now. That will send an email to one of our ambassadors. If you're even more bored, scroll down a little further and you'll actually see a couple of our ambassadors making tits of themselves on the stand-up comedy stage. Nonetheless, just click on the link, get in contact, and you can be as funny as you want to be.
So when you guys, well, this is actually a question for all of you because you've done comedy for a bit. When you're actually watching comedy acts or gigs and or people trying it out either for the first time or have done it for a while, do you sort of like start viewing their material as material rather than just, oh, this is somebody just telling a funny story, like a casual like me would sort of just be like, oh, well, this is really good and get hooked and enjoy it? Do you kind of sit and just go, I see what he did there, or oh, that's interesting? Do you sort of, as your mentality changed from like the first time you started to sort of now, really, is the question on how you view said material?
Who's going to take this one then? Shall I go first?
You start off, Nick.
Okay. Well, I suppose how you view, well, if I'm honest, when I'm like doing, because obviously I run a load of shows at the Edinburgh Fringe and whatnot, and going from show to show, I don't always watch comedians as much. Certainly the ones not doing my show, because I know kind of who does what, and even the new acts. Sometimes I watch the newer acts or ones that I've never seen before. I pay a lot more attention, just because I don't want to book them again, whatever. But generally, I just kind of like, this is going to sound a bit wank now, but I just kind of like more feel the energy. And if like, so it's a bit like, and here's go back to another tube analogy. And apparently this is true. I've never been a tube driver. I've been on the front of trains, but apparently like tube drivers don't see green signals. They only see red signals because like they don't need to do anything if they see a green. So you see a red, oh God, stop, right? And I'm a bit like that in many ways when I run my own shows, especially if it's like a fast moving show. Because it's like I feel the energy's going well. If the energy starts to go weird, okay, now I'm paying attention. Do you know what I mean? So, but when it, and that's like when I run my shows in Edinburgh. But when especially new act nights, I tend to pay attention a lot more because I don't always see as many. If I pop into like an open mic night in, say, in Brighton or London or whatever, I pay attention. And the reason I'll tell you why I pay more attention is not because I'm like watching, where they're making mistakes or whatnot. It's because, and you've probably seen this so many times, when you get professional comedians on the circuit, they tend to, once they've got a set that works, they tend to do it again. You can, because it's like most people don't come to comedy again and again, and you'll be all around the country. It's highly unlikely that people will see you again and again. If you want to go to fringes and stuff, you want to build up a fan base, change your material. But sometimes you get caught up in doing a lot of the same material and you're getting paid to do a job. So you don't want to keep trying new material. I'll piss about some new material sometimes, especially as MC. What I like about watching newer acts is it reminds you of being a newer act. And we all had to come up with new material at some point. And it's like, again, watching the process of like, well, they can think of all these new things. Why can't a lot more professional comedians think of new things? Do you know what I mean? So it's that, getting away from what work. We all got the, like you said, you get to a 5, 10, 20, bankable 20 minutes, you can get paid. You're a good MC, you can get paid. And when you can MC, you can try out new material. But it's always impressive watching new acts. And obviously they make dreadful mistakes because they haven't got the skills yet and they make silly mistakes. But it's impressive how they come up with new material because that they have to. Whereas when you're getting paid and, and you're doing, you don't have to do new material all the time. Whereas new acts have to keep coming up with new material to build up their 20. And so I really pay attention to those. And so you see the mistakes. But I'm more kind of going, oh, that's a good idea you've come up with there. I'll have that. I tell you what, yeah. I mean, some people probably do that, But I'm just not always impressed that they come up with these new ideas, and especially given that comedy's changed over the years and things are a little bit more politically correct now, so it's working ways around all of that. But yeah, that's what I do when I watch newer acts. When I watch like professional acts, or I do my own shows. It's like, well, a lot of them do similar stuff anyway.
What about you, Gabe? What do you see?
I see what I'm looking at.
I love the fact that you're so invested. You put so much into the science behind it.
I was just thinking he was going to say,
beard.
I see dead people. That's what I thought he was going to say.
Yeah, mate, I am Titanic and Sixth Sense all rolled into one. I see dead people and I just see dead people all the time.
It's because he's a serial killer. It's because he's a serial killer.
I've seen a lot of dead people in my audiences, I'll tell you that.
No, it's like
I suppose
I like to see people sort of like pushing the boundary a little bit. I mean, yeah, shock. I'm the kind of guy. I'm the kind of guy that like picks up a girl in the night, in the nightclub and says, "Do you fancy a little bum fun?" I just like to see where the boundaries are, and then I kind of play within the court that I'm allowed to be in. But I like people who push the sort of boundary a bit. But yeah, I love seeing people like push the boundary a little bit, whether it's just through material or whether it's like through an avenue. I like seeing people go in a different way. There was a young kid I saw who deadpanned everything, and I think deadpanning stuff's really cool. And then one of his big setups was like when he slaps the mic. That was a big setup, and then he slapped the mic. And everyone laughed at him slapping the mic because they knew something coming up was going to be amazing. It was really good.
I suppose the thing I look for now, because Jay did warn us when we were doing our course, after you've done the course, you see comedy in a different way. I don't see it necessarily different at the moment. It's I see it differently in reflection. What I look when I'm watching the act is I'm looking at the performance. And there is something about performing when you know they're comfortable on stage. That is something, they're not overtly worried. It is that confidence up there. They're going through their material. But then it's secondly, I think that was drummed into us by Jay again, is you're actually watching the audience's reaction, because they'll tell a joke, no, that's not going to land. Bang, suddenly there's a big laughter in the room, and I'm there going, they've got a different take. Oh, wow. And then you will use the common terms that we're used to. Oh, that was such a nice, tidy little setup, really short, really high punchline rate. Oh, they did some callbacks there. They did a full strop. Or the technical terms for it. But when I'm actually watching the act performing, it is the performance I look at most, going, that's how they're getting this room to get behind them.
Just quickly, did I answer the question properly, or did I completely fuck it up?
No, I think you answered it, because and that's something about your style of comedy, isn't it, Gabe? Because you
completely fucking it up.
Well, let's put it this way: there's normally a line in the sand. You've never even seen the fucking sand. You were at the top of the fucking mountain looking down, going, "Oh no, this is acceptable." I would go into, and we're not going to use it in this podcast episode, but there is one title of a podcast episode you want us to record that we are never recording. You don't know where the pigging line is.
Incidentally, Nick, there's been one joke that I said that got deleted from a podcast.
Because it means I can't hear it then.
No, I said Guinness. I said Guinness Zero alcohol is kind of like eating out your sister. It tastes the same, but it's wrong.
And that's a call out to Jeff Jones. When you listen to this episode, we've actually used the gag in the podcast.
Have we? Ah, sick.
Nick, why would you recommend somebody to get into stand-up comedy? Is there a single reason, or is there a benefit you can get out from doing stand-up comedy?
I think there's a number of benefits you can get out of doing stand-up comedy. There's not one reason I'd say for anyone to do it. I do think, I mean, there are people that got no desire to do it. They're never going to do it. But I think it'd be good for everyone to try it, because it's just something that's good to try. And there's so many things you can get out of it, which is one of the things that struck me by, when I started doing the courses, was because I thought everyone that did a comedy course wanted to be a comedian, but they don't. I'd probably say about a third of people that have done the Laughing Horse courses on my courses actually want to be comedians. A lot of people do it because I know it's to help build confidence. It might help with work presentations, because because it's a bucket list thing. A mate dared them to do it. So many reasons that people do it. But I would say, yeah, you can get confidence out of it. You can, there's so many different things, getting over fears and, boosting your self-esteem. So many reasons to do it. I mean, obviously, you do see some people after courses or after doing a number of new act nights that you do think, all right, it's time to call it a day now, mate. and I'd never tell anyone to give up or not to do it. But there are some people you don't have that wherewithal or that analytical brain to work out how to get better. And I mean, Jay's got this thing like, oh, you can teach anyone to be a comedian. Well, you can teach people the basics of comedy. I slightly disagree with Jay with regards, you can teach anyone to be a comedian. I think you can teach them how to be a comedian. You can give them the tools, and you can give them the confidence to get on stage. But can you turn them into a comedian? I don't know. You can teach someone a magic trick, but they've still got to put the time into perfecting that magic trick. And comedy is not too dissimilar, but I think that there has to be, you've got to learn how to perform. You've got to have a bit of personality, and a successful magician will have more personality as well. But like me and Jay say, you can teach anyone the basics of comedy, how to get up there. But I say to people, I can teach you how to drive a car, but I can't make you win the F1. Do you know what I mean? But but I can, so the basics are there and give people the confidence. And there's so many things they can get out of it. You all got a lot out of it, it seems.
So Nick, ultimately, like, what can you tell Jay to do to be more funny?
Be more like Maroon.
Off for a start.
Oh, and I thought we were talking about Jay Sodergar for a second. Fucking hell.
Oh, no.
No, because he may have been talking about Jay Sodergar, but there's no way Jay Sodergar's getting any better. It's not happening.
Mate, if there was a report in Gosport for a nonce about, you're top of the pile.
Yeah, definitely, mate.
You've gone from being Wish version of
the Wish version of what was his name?
I know.
Christopher Walken. The Wish version of Christopher Walken.
You've gone from Wish Christopher Walken to number one nonce.
Listen, can I tell you a story about nonces? About comedy. Gabe will love this. Listen, now, here's the thing, right?
I would like to pre-add, I do not condone nonsense.
No, he just partakes.
Just partake, yeah. I don't condone it. I do it. I just don't condone it.
I don't. I fucking hate kids. Shit. They're stupid.
Project Comedy would like to announce we are not sponsored by the Paedophile Alliance.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
But listen, this is the dangers of, I mean, look, we all know it's jokes, again, how you take jokes and what's behind jokes. Anyway, so listen, I did this gig in Margate in this theatre, apparently the second oldest theatre in the country. Can't remember the name of it, right? And I was with a chap by the name of Ian Franklin at the time. He used to have a thing called Comic Voice Management, and he was my manager. Anyway, so I did the gig, and I think I was on with Susan Murray and Richard Morton. And I think I was MC, and Susan Murray went on first. Anyway, so there was only about 90 people in. It held about 360, this theatre, right? But there were a nice 90 people all near the front, in the middle. And Susan Murray goes on. She's very, very good comedian. And this guy, I'd found out this guy, or she did, there was these 4 or 5 guys. One of them's name was Nick, and he was a carpet fitter. And he started heckling Susan Murray, right? And Susan Murray's got this she's got Brummie accent, Scottish heritage, Brummie accent, and she's not someone to trifle with. So she fucking had him, right? She had him, this bastard, right? Anyway, but then I go back as MCS, and so I had to go at him. There was a break. I came back after the break and thought, right, I'm going for this Nick, right? So I went for him. They were all a bit of a laugh. He was heckling at their fun, right? And then, so because we're having a bit of banter, his mate chipped in, Nick's mate. They're all sort of like mid to late 40s, these guys go, oh, and also he's a carpet fitter by trade, but he's a scout master, right? A scout leader. So
hello.
Exactly. So in my head, I know there's 2 routes I can go down. I used to be in the scouts, and I've got some stories about being a scout. Or I know that what they're trying to do is insinuate that he's a paedophile, and I'm going to have a go at him about that. So which route did I take? Obviously. So I said, oh, so you say scout leader, what you really mean is paedophile, right? So, and everyone's laughing, everyone's having a laugh. Like Nick, the carpet fitter, pedo scout leader, he's having a laugh because that's what his mates, what they've obviously taken the piss out of him about it, right? So I'm going about the pedo thing. It became this whole thing, Nick the pedo, right? And it was like everyone's on it. It's a bit of a laugh. Everyone knows it's a laugh. He's fine with it, right? A few days later after the gig, I get an email from my agent going that Will, the manager of the theatre, has messaged him to ask for an apology, right? Actually, no, it was about 3 weeks after the gig. An apology for what I said. He rings me up and he goes, did you call one of the guys in the audience in Margate? And I knew where he was going. And I was like, he goes, what, a paedophile? I went, yeah. And he said, oh, it's just that this Will's been in touch to say, like, check this. Apparently, I still think that's maybe a bit of a wind-up. I don't know. But apparently, everyone in the theatre, because Margate's quite a small town, right? So everyone in the theatre has either seen him on the street or in the bars, and they say, hey, it's Nick the pedo, right? And everyone's a bit of a joke. But there are people that weren't at the gig that are taking this shit seriously. And he's been getting like phone calls to his work in the middle of the night calling him a pedo. He's actually had to give up being a scout leader because people are calling him a pedo. And like that, my agent said he's had a really tough time of it, and his business is suffering, and also because you called him a pedo. And I'm like, it was just a joke. His mates wanted me to say it. And in the end, I had to ring up another comedian friend who was actually a lawyer, and he said, look, he goes, you don't have to have any worries about it. It was in a comedy environment. It's not like if you apologize, he can sue you. So I did. I sent a letter of an apology, but apparently calling him this pedo, and people was like, it really affected his life in Margate.
Bloody hell.
I still think they might have been winding me up, but it was serious.
No, personally, I think that's what you get for living in Margate.
I was going to say, it's a bit like Gosport. It's a very shallow gene pool. It's like...
To be fair, I mean, he's a carpenter, so he'll have a white van. So,
I
mean, if he walks around going like, hey, I've got some Haribo here.
But it was, I mean, it's all fun and games. Like I laughed about it at the time, and I laugh about it now. But it just goes to show you that, like, some of the things you say on stage can affect people's lives, man. Still,
yeah, shocking.
Don't fucking heckle then.
If somebody wanted to get into stand-up, where would you recommend they got into it, Nick?
Well, I suppose the thing about it is as well, it's hard. It's where you live as well, isn't it? Because if you live in London or Manchester or Brighton or Edinburgh or Glasgow, there's always loads and loads of gigs, open mic gigs to do, isn't there? Which is good. But
see, I'd complain about that, like, because I think Manchester's so big now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm struggling to get an open mic night, but Jamie, who has only just fucking turned up, who lives in a shithole, would think that, you know, it's a grand place to get free night. However, for me, Manchester I'm struggling to find anywhere to get my foot in.
Okay, because I think, well, that's the thing. You've got to travel. Basically, it's just a case of getting to as many open mic nights as you can. I mean, comedy courses are a good place to start. And I only do the beginners courses. I don't do advanced or intermediate, because I just think once you've got the tools and the confidence to get up on stage, then you talk to people at gigs, they'll give you advice. That just do as many gigs as you can. So I would just say wherever you live, it's I've got friends that live out in like Devon and Cornwall, and they have some gigs down there. But if you don't live somewhere where there's loads of open mic nights, you're going to have to travel, and that's the thing. Just turn up, get the gigs, do the gigs, ask advice, do a course if you can, and then just get out there and gig. It's great for on the job training, so to speak. Just get out there and do as many gigs as you can.
I mean, I'm going to throw a question to our participants, us lot, rather than you, Nick, because you mentioned it's like a little earlier about the transferable skills, and especially because we've got the range of experience in here. Jamie, when you actually look at what stand-up has given you, what transferable skills has stand-up given you? Because you haven't given up the day job. You're not a professional comedian yet, but you really enjoy getting out there and performing. What transferable skills has doing comedy over the last couple of years given you?
Well, Nick, hello everybody. Nick touched on it just then. So, like presentations, I can do at work now a lot better than I used to. It's given me more confidence to talk in groups and to me managers. If I'm going for interviews for other roles in the company, I'm quite happy doing that. Unfortunately, me having an air quotes real job at the minute, I have to cope with real life, and comedy's helped. Also, it's kind of turned on my comedy brain a little bit. So if any situation goes on at work, I can quite often find the funny in it. Whereas before, I might not have done it. It just made me more in tune with getting the most out of humor, really.
Because you can de-stress those moments by introducing a bit of humor in real life, because we've now got the comedy brain of, oh, actually this may sound really sad and dark and what have you. Here's a chance where I can lift the mood and move on a bit, because the comedy brain goes, oh, that's a setup, I'm going to use that, and then actually get us through that moment.
100%, yeah.
Gabe, what sort of transferable skills have you gained from stand-up comedy?
I'm not so sure about transferable skills as opposed to experience, really. I think I use what I've gone through as a way to sort of help with my recovery, dealing with all the issues that I've got going on. For instance, the suicidal joke that I do. I mean, nobody thinks that suicidal is funny, but when I say that, the army's idea of like helping you with a suicide was a sturdy bar in your wardrobe.
Yep, I love that joke.
Yeah, I love it too, but equally, it's a homage to my best friend who I actually found hung up in his wardrobe. I honestly really, really think that if you can laugh about stuff, and if you can make people laugh about the stuff that is the most darkest of journeys that you've gone through, then surely that's a good thing.
How about you, Sean? I mean, seeing as you're a newbie into it, have you found anything that just by learning the skills you've ended up going, actually, yeah, this has been useful to me?
You think you're so fucking sly, keep bringing this up, you motherfucker. No, I mean, by this sort of like, apart from having like a creative outlet, it is to like sort of go and do some confidence, and also kind of just tick it off the bucket list and things sort of like Nick sort of said I'd seen with other people anyway. As far as skills go, I've always, before I did this, I was trying to make jokes out of everything, mainly just to deal with the abject misery of having PTSD. But as far as transferable skills, I can try and filter stuff a little bit better already, but not much, but a little bit. As I get get there. I just got to work on it. But I think once I start doing a gig or do my first gig and start trying to refine and process and do a lot of this stuff, I think I'll start picking up a bit more and be able to answer that question a little bit better, to be honest.
Yeah.
But as far as transferable, I mean, if there's a transferee with some skills listening, don't contact me. But yeah,
I mean, for myself, I'm going to echo what Gabe said. The biggest power that I've gained from doing stand-up comedy is we know what it's like with PTSD and mental health issues and what have you. The darkness can descend on you so rapidly, but actually having a comedy skill set, you can turn the darkness into funny. That's something so joyous about the writing process, because when you're having a dark moment, you can open up your laptop, start chucking this down and go, if it's not funny, throw it off the page. And suddenly you can lift your own mood in a really, really dark moment to go, right, what I've just written there is, it's dark, it's horrible. Where's the funny? Right, now delete the stuff that isn't funny. And you can end up taking your darkness and turning it into humor for your own internal mental health. And we've got that little cliche we sometimes do on the Project Wrecking courses. I turn around to somebody and go, if you can stand in the corner of the pub and make somebody laugh for 5 minutes long because of something you've written, how easy will it be for you to go in and do a job interview? You're standing pretty much naked in the corner of a pub with a microphone, making people laugh solidly for 5 minutes long. All you're doing is selling yourself in a job interview. It's easier to do a job interview than a 5-minute set. That's instantly a skill set. Is this true for you, Dave? Did you find that you had real sort of like short-term memory issues? And I found that by learning my set, I've actually increased my ability to deal with short-term memory.
Hey, I've got short-term, medium-term, long-term memory issues. But I honestly think that if it gives us like the strength again to go up and be as exposed as we are on stage, I mean, not physically, I mean metaphorically.
Yeah.
Although I would be exposed on stage if you want me to be.
No, thanks, mate. We've all seen it.
All depends on how much you want to pay me. But no,
there's only so many times you can see a button mushroom. I mean,
the next stage is to eat it.
Yeah, but the only trouble is it's got pus dribbling out the end of it.
It was cold, and I told you I had an infection at the time. Right.
Adds to the flavor.
Yeah,
exactly. Cheers, Sean. Thanks for backing me up there.
It was very saucy.
I think anything that gives people anyone that has an anxiety issue or a self-confidence issue, whilst being on stage seems like the most like exorbitant thing to do. I honestly think it is the best thing, because going up there with material that you know is funny and you've done, and we recycle between ourselves. I honestly think it's the best thing for you to help it get in that healing process and get that confidence back up within yourself. And I think when you back yourself, I think that's the best thing that you'll ever do.
It nicely links me back across to you then, Nick. Right, so you've met us guys and what have you. Do you think it's a two-parter question, if you like. Do you think there is a place for veterans on the stand-up circuit? I mean, are we actually a relevant bunch of people?
Oh, definitely. Without a doubt, you've got proper stories to tell for a start. Not like a lot of these people that get on stage and they talk about their issues in life and they're moaning about this and that. And, a lot of it isn't actually a hell of a lot of funny stuff, but you've got proper stories to tell, proper, tragedies have happened in your life, and as the old saying goes, comedy is tragedy plus time. And and it's a good example is a bit like when comedians get together. We're not talking about the success stories, the great gigs. We're talking about the shit gigs that when you did, you felt like fuck me, this is terrible, man. Dying on stage, it's horrendous. But they're still the stories you tell later on. But no one wants to. The audiences and the comedians don't want to hear about the great gigs. They want to hear about the shit gigs, man. And, you know, so and they want to hear about the terrible things that have happened. And if you guys can take the terrible things that you've seen and that have happened to you and make them funny, I mean, immediately people are going to listen anyway. Like, look, this happened and whatever. Then you can turn that and not only just turn it into jokes, but actually show people that you can get over the things that you've been through. I think that makes for great comedy. And I think certainly, like I touched on a little bit a couple of minutes ago, you've got people that go on stage and they're talking about this and this happened in my life. And imagine then you get followed by one of you guys and you tell some proper stories of like, it's like, yeah, you're fucking, what you think is bad in your life ain't nothing compared to what some people have been like. And so I think from that point of view, the things you've got to say, but also because it's a relevant thing, comedy to help people get over the things you've been through, and as like Gabe said, to turn it into jokes, and that does help. And I think that's lost on the circuit these days, that people are talking about things to get them through the day, to help them understand, you know, rather than just going, oh, you shouldn't say that, you can't say that, you can't joke about that. It's like, yeah, you can joke about anything. You can't joke about it to anybody, but you should be able to joke about anything. And you guys have definitely got things to say, you know, and I think it's totally relevant from your point of view and from the point of view of the circuit itself.
I think some veterans, especially the likes of us that got things like psychiatric disabilities or mental health issues, would think, well, maybe that's too much of a barrier. But I'm just from my limited time on the circuit, I've encountered so many people with various forms of disability that have ended up becoming very, very successful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you must have seen as well, Nick. It's, just because you do have mental health issues or a psychiatric disability, it's not a barrier to become a comedian, is it?
No, it's not. I think it helps. You know, you've actually got something to talk about. You know, and I think that you guys and the people that you know should definitely, do more gigs, start doing gigs, and I think it's a great way of. Because I know that from some of the things that I'm involved with some charity stuff, which I won't go into too much, and other things with regard to other people that I know have done things, comedy is a good way to get over, mental health issues. And I'm actually working on some stuff with people over this way to maybe start up some more workshops and more charitable things to encourage people to not necessarily just get into comedy, but to do that, but also to use comedy, to actually do it and get over some of your stuff, but also go and watch it, go and see it performed, and using comedy as a way to help people get through and over mental health issues.
I mean, it's something that's made me quite excited recently. I mean, obviously, Project Comedy, that started during the lockdowns of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And it was supposed to be a short-term thing. And here we are, early 2024, and Project Comedy is still running. I'm really grateful to see that there's loads of other comedy projects breaking out around the UK. Battleback ran a comedy for recovery course.
Mm-hmm.
There's also been Up Courage. Unfortunately, Up Courage are only running this in London. They've got a stand-up comedy course going there to help out with those sort of elements. To use comedy for your recovery and have a great time. But before we end up wrapping things up, if you were to give a tip to a new comedian or an improving comedian, what tips would you give them, or what piece of resilience would you recommend they have?
I would personally say go up and give someone a massive hug and tell them that they're going to be fucking sound.
You give people hugs, the only sound is cracking ribs. That's the only sound.
Fucking burr.
Big Rogers and Rary.
But I mean, it's odd. I just think it's a case of it is. I mean, to think of a slogan of a famous sportswear company, just do it. You just got to get up there and go out there, just get up there and talk to people, do gigs, do courses.
Sorry, Nick. I think that was Shia LaBeouf that said, "Just do it."
Just do it. Coincidentally, I have a shirt that says, "No, you do it."
So yeah, Shia LaBeouf, what a guy. So yeah, yeah, it's just a case of, because again, I took years to from when I had the idea to do it, and then getting up and doing it. It's like, I wish I'd have done it a bit sooner, but you start when you start. And I mean, even now, post COVID, it's like my attitude towards a lot of things in comedy post COVID has changed, and that affected people in so many ways. I still have. I've never been really an anxious person, but I get weirdly slightly anxious a bit more about comedy and stuff. And it took a while to get back into it, because I got to the stage where I was totally confident I was funny. And you get bad gigs, good gigs, but then when you've got like two couple of years of not being able to gig and then having to get back into it, and it was all weird with social distancing and all that. But yeah, but you've just got to get up there and do it, haven't you? And I just think you've got to get out there, and it's not for everyone, but I would encourage everyone to give it a go. And I think for guys like yourself and other people like yourselves that have got the PTSD stuff, and which I can't even begin to understand what you guys have been through, but other people with mental health issues, get up there and try and do it. Although I've seen some people that stand-up comedy just isn't for them. You can see that it's not helping with their mental health, and you get people going, "No, you keep going." It's like, if comedy in itself is causing people emotional and psychological distress, don't do it. It's like encouraging someone with a broken leg to play football. It's like, no, don't do it. But I think comedy is a good way to help get over some of the things that you and other people have been through and continue to go through.
Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Have you got any upcoming gigs that we could come and support you at, or have you got any channels on social media we can follow you at?
Channels on social media. Well, you know what? I've never really got into TikTok. I looked at it once about 4 years ago, and I thought, oh, fuck that. But I do think I should get more into it. I just do the usual, Facebook. Nik Coppin Comedy is my Facebook page. Obviously, there's Twitter. Well, X now, isn't it? X. Nik Coppin, at Nik Coppin, and then Instagram, usual, just that sort of stuff. I should post more, and obviously my website's nikcoppin.com. But upcoming gigs, I'm off to Australia and Asia in about 3 weeks, so I don't think any of you are going to turn up there. But
hey, I will go to Asia. It's not a fucking problem, pal.
That's good. Well, you get on my website and look at the Australia and Asia dates, mate. But also, that gig you came and watched me do with Uncle Jim in October, I think it was. I'm doing that with Bobby Davro in June, so maybe you should come down and do a spot, mate.
Oh, I'd love you. If you gave me the opportunity, I'd fucking take it up. I'd take it up.
I'll give you details, but any that are in
he's going to fuck you off, and he's going to rough me a bit.
You could go to us. Could you look like a bogan?
But obviously, I'm doing the Brighton. You do look like a bogan, actually. To be fair, but, I'm doing. Get the baseball cap on. You actually do look a lot like, minus the baseball cap, the guy that was at a gig you get a lot of bogans with the car race weekend. They've got this big car race weekend they used to have. And there was one guy who did look a bit like you, Gabe. He had a baseball cap on, and he was proper Aussie bogan, like, he had a singlet on. Oh, bogan. Sat in the middle of the room. Anyway, I used to do this bit. It was basically questioning people's views on ladyboys in Thailand and trans thing. Well, it's quite pro-trans if people listen properly, but it's more about a thing about ladyboys in Thailand, and people think they're a bit odd, but they're great fun, right? Anyway, I used to challenge people as to, would you rather go to this person with a cock or this person with a vagina, a good-looking woman? Anyway, it was all about trying to get someone to admit they'd rather go out with someone like Angelina Jolie with a cock or Harold Bishop Neighbours with a vagina, right? So that was the question. And there was loads of scenarios I would give them, and I'd ask them questions, because it was all about, does it really matter as long as you love someone, right? That was but you'd always pick on the biggest, hardest guy in the room, or someone with a girlfriend. Anyway, this one guy, again, you've reminded me of it, big bushy beard, baseball cap on, Holden baseball caps. That was like Holden versus Ford and all that. Holden's Australia's version of Vauxhall. Anyway, so he sat in the middle of the room like this, right? So I said, look, I picked on this guy. I said, come on, mate, come on. Would you rather, right, have like your partner be Angelina Jolie with a cock, or Harold Bishop from Neighbours with a vagina, right? Now, usually people would squirm, and I'd give them weird scenarios. But this guy just sat there and he went, I'd rather have Angelina Jolie with my fucking cock. And I was like, fair play. And anyway, but he looked a lot like you, weirdly, Gabe. That was what reminded me of the story.
Well, thank you for that.
Welcome anytime. But of course, I'm doing the Brighton Fringe again next year. So if anyone's around Brighton, come and do some spots at a couple of the shows in Brighton if you're around that I'm putting on.
That would be absolutely amazing. Gentlemen, This has been an absolutely amazing evening. Hopefully it's going to encourage not only the veteran community, but any of our listeners to go, give stand-up a go. It's actually worth it. And there is a route to success. More importantly, you can get out there and have a lot of great fun. First and foremost, I've got to thank my regular guests within the podcast. So thanks very much, Jamie, Gabe, and Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Nick, you've been an absolute delight. Please follow him. We'll try and put the hyperlinks into his social media accounts on the podcast episode. Nick, you've been an absolute delight. It's been brilliant, mate.
It's been fun, mate. It's been great laugh. Hopefully we can do it again soon sometime.
So in a fortnight's time, there will be another episode of the Project Comedy Podcast. So until next time. If you want to see what we're actually like on stage, please have a look at our YouTube channel. Search for Project Comedy, Veterans Doing Stand-Up, and look for our black and white logo that's exactly the same as the one we use for this podcast. You can also now follow us on Twitter. We can be found at Proj Comedy. That's at PROJ Comedy. And me, Jay Saunders, I can be found on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter if you look for Comic J Saunders. That's all one word with the letter J in the middle. Comic J Saunders. Thanks again to everyone that's taken part in this episode. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Project Comedy Podcast. Please support our veterans as they continue their comedy journeys. To find out more, including gigs our veterans are doing, please search for the Project Comedy group on Facebook, where you'll also find links to Project Recce, the veterans charity that makes Project Comedy possible.